The war had reached its breaking point. The vastness of space above Targos IV was filled with fire and destruction as the final battle between the Allied coalition and the Vorthan Dominion unfolded. The Dominion had always been a force of terror, expanding their empire without mercy, crushing weaker civilizations beneath their might. Now, after years of bloodshed, their victory seemed inevitable. The coalition's last fleet, battered and outnumbered, floated in the void, struggling to hold the line. Explosions flared in the darkness as Dominion warships, sleek and deadly, unleashed relentless barrages of plasma fire. Shield generators flickered and failed. Hulls cracked under the sheer force of the assault. Inside the flagship of the coalition, Admiral Jorvan gripped the edge of the command console, his face set in grim determination as his officers scrambled around him. Reports were coming in from every side. Ships lost, defenses crumbling, no reinforcements left. The Dominion's supreme commander, Varkis Kotor, watched from the bridge of his own dreadnought, a cruel smirk playing on his reptilian features. "This is the end," he muttered, his voice filled with confidence. "The last resistance falls today." The coalition had fought bravely, but bravery alone could not win wars. Numbers mattered, firepower mattered, and in both, the Dominion held the advantage. Their ships were superior, their technology deadlier, their warriors relentless. The battlefield had become a graveyard of shattered vessels, the drifting remains of destroyed cruisers and battleships painting a grim picture of the coalition's fate. Communication lines were filled with distress calls and last-ditch commands, but none of it would change the inevitable. The Dominion had already begun sending out victory messages across the galactic networks, proclaiming the death of the coalition, the final conquest of the last free worlds. The enemy was so certain of their triumph that they had slowed their assault, taking their time, savoring the moment before delivering the final blow. Their battleships loomed like executioners, weapons primed, waiting for the Supreme Commander's signal to unleash the final barrage. The coalition's strongest warships, those that had survived countless battles, were now reduced to mere obstacles delaying the inevitable. Admiral Jorvan exhaled slowly, his hands tightening into fists. He had always known this war might end like this, but he had hoped that something, anything, would change the tide. Yet hope was a fragile thing in the face of overwhelming reality. He turned to his communications officer, about to give the order for one last, desperate push. If they were going to die, they would die fighting. But before he could speak, a sharp alarm filled the bridge. Something had appeared on the scanners, something large, moving at an impossible speed. Officers scrambled to make sense of the readings. It wasn't a Dominion warship, nor was it a coalition vessel. It was unknown. The bridge fell silent as the strange object exited hyperspace with unnatural precision, stopping right at the edge of the battlefield. For a moment, no one moved. Then, the communication channels crackled to life, and a single message echoed across every ship in the system, Dominion and Coalition alike. "This is the USS Blackstar. Stand down or be destroyed." The Dominion officers exchanged glances of confusion. Supreme Commander Varkis Kotor's smirk faltered for the first time. He narrowed his eyes, studying the readings. The ship, if it even was a ship, was massive, unlike anything recorded in the galactic databases. Its design was unfamiliar, its energy signatures unreadable. The hull was dark, absorbing the surrounding light rather than reflecting it, making it difficult to define its exact shape. More troubling was the fact that Dominion scanners could not penetrate its surface. No weapons were visible, no shields detected, yet an unsettling aura of power surrounded it. The Supreme Commander sneered. "A trick," he muttered, waving a hand. "Some desperate coalition ploy. Destroy it." The order was given, and the nearest Dominion warships adjusted their positions, locking onto the Blackstar. Missiles launched. Plasma bolts streaked through the void, all aimed directly at the unknown vessel. But the moment the weapons should have struck, something impossible happened. The Blackstar flickered, just for a fraction of a second, before the attacks phased through it, as if it wasn't entirely there. Then, before anyone could react, the Blackstar moved. It wasn't like the sluggish maneuvers of the massive warships that dominated the battlefield. It didn't bank or turn. It shifted, as if space itself bent around it. And then it struck. A single pulse of energy erupted from the vessel, not a beam or projectile, but something different. The nearest Dominion battleship, one of their most powerful vessels, was gone in an instant. No explosion, no debris, just gone. The Dominion fleet hesitated. Confusion turned to fear. Another pulse fired, and another warship vanished. The Supreme Commander's eyes widened in disbelief. This wasn't possible. No technology, no weapon, nothing in the known galaxy could do this. And yet, the Blackstar did not stop. It moved again, appearing behind an enemy formation, striking with perfect accuracy. Warships that had terrorized the galaxy for years were being erased in seconds. Panic spread like wildfire. The Dominion fleet, once so sure of its victory, now faced something it could not understand, let alone defeat. On the Coalition flagship, Admiral Jorvan watched in stunned silence. The ship had answered no hails, had given no explanations. It had simply arrived and begun its silent war against the Dominion. Who commanded it? Where had it come from? None of it mattered now. What mattered was that the tide had turned. All ships, advance, Jorvan ordered, his voice steady. We take back Targos IV. And with that, the remnants of the Coalition fleet surged forward, striking the Dominion forces with renewed strength. The battle that had seemed lost only moments ago had transformed into something else entirely. It was no longer a struggle for survival. It was a hunt. The Dominion, who had believed themselves invincible, were now the prey. For the first time in recorded history, the Vorthan Dominion was running. Supreme Commander Varkis Kautor, his confidence shattered, gave the order to retreat, but there was no safe escape. Every attempt to flee was met with the relentless pursuit of the Blackstar. The vessel moved with an intelligence that defied logic, cutting off escape routes, isolating ships before eliminating them. The Supreme Commander clenched his jaw, realizing too late that the war had already been decided, not by the Coalition, not by any grand strategy, but by the arrival of a single unknown force. And as he stared at the Blackstar, he felt something he had never known before. Fear. The battle above Targos IV had taken a strange turn. What had seemed like the final victory for the Vorthan Dominion was now slipping through their grasp. The Coalition fleet, which had been moments away from total annihilation, was suddenly fighting back with renewed strength. But it wasn't because of any new strategy or hidden reserves. It was because of the arrival of the unknown warship, the USS Blackstar. No one knew where it had come from. No one understood how it moved. And no one could explain how it was destroying Dominion ships with terrifying ease. It didn't use missiles, lasers, or any weapon that the galaxy had seen before. It simply fired pulses of energy that erased anything in their path, leaving behind nothing but silence. The fear among the Dominion officers was growing, and for the first time in the war, Supreme Commander Varkis Kautor felt a sliver of doubt creep into his mind. He watched from the bridge of his dreadnought, his claws tapping against the control panel as his reptilian eyes remained fixed on the dark vessel floating at the edge of the battlefield. The Blackstar did not resemble any known warship. Its surface was smooth, black like the void itself, as if it absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Its energy readings were unlike anything seen before, shifting unpredictably, making it impossible to get a proper scan. And worse, it was silent. No transmissions, no signals, nothing but the single warning it had given upon arrival. Stand down or be destroyed. The Dominion had not stood down, and now they were being destroyed. The Supreme Commander's second-in-command, Admiral Vekrin, turned to him, his expression uneasy. "Commander, our sensors still can't penetrate its hull. We've sent multiple scans, but the readings keep shifting. It's like the ship doesn't fully exist in our dimension. His words sent a ripple of unease through the bridge crew. The Dominion had faced advanced civilizations before, but never something like this. A warship that could phase through attacks, disrupt targeting systems, and erase ships without a trace. It was beyond logic. Yet, it was happening. Another Dominion cruiser attempted to fire on the Blackstar, launching a full barrage of plasma torpedoes, each one capable of reducing a city to rubble. The torpedoes never reached their target. The moment they got close, the Blackstar vanished from its position and reappeared behind the Dominion formation as if it had never been there in the first place. A pulse of energy followed, and the attacking cruiser was gone. No explosion, no debris, just gone. The Dominion fleet hesitated. These were elite warriors, conquerors of dozens of species, and yet, in the presence of this single ship, they felt something they had never experienced before. Fear. The coalition forces, who had moments ago been prepared for their final stand, were now pressing the attack. Their fleet had been reduced to less than half its original size, but now they were advancing, pushing the Dominion back, using the Blackstar's sudden assault as an opportunity to regain lost ground. On the bridge of the coalition flagship, Admiral Jorvan watched the battlefield unfold with the same confusion as the Dominion. He had no idea who commanded the Blackstar, nor did he understand its capabilities. But right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was that it was fighting against the Dominion. "Focus fire on the nearest enemy warships," Jorvan ordered. "If this Blackstar is giving us a chance, we take it." His officers scrambled to comply, and soon, the coalition warships joined the fight once more, this time with hope burning in their hearts. The Dominion, however, was not ready to accept defeat. Supreme Commander Varkis Kotur's eyes narrowed, his expression darkening as he turned to his weapons officer. "Enough of this hesitation," he growled. "If we cannot scan it, if we cannot track it, then we will burn everything around it. Order all ships to fire in a full radius. Turn that section of space into an inferno." It was a desperate order, but desperation was all the Dominion had left. The fleet obeyed. Hundreds of warships, still vastly outnumbering the coalition, opened fire in every direction, filling space with deadly energy blasts. It was a storm of destruction, a wall of fire that no ship could evade. And yet, as the weapons reached the Blackstar's position, something strange happened. The energy twisted. The space around the Blackstar seemed to ripple like water, bending the attacks away, redirecting them harmlessly into the void. The Dominion's most powerful weapons, their greatest arsenal, meant nothing. Supreme Commander Varkis Kotur felt his heart pound. "Impossible," he whispered, his confidence shaken for the first time in his long career. Then the Blackstar responded. It moved again, fast and precise, as if it could predict every move before it happened. Another pulse of energy fired, and a Dominion battleship, one of the largest in the fleet, vanished in an instant. The Supreme Commander gritted his teeth, his claws digging into the metal of his command chair. This wasn't war. This wasn't strategy. This was something else, something unnatural. He could see the fear spreading through his fleet. Some ships were already trying to retreat, breaking formation, their captains no longer willing to die for a battle they no longer understood. The Dominion did not retreat. It was against everything they stood for. And yet, here they were, backing away from a single warship. It was unacceptable. "No more," Varkis snarled. "Order the dreadnoughts to fire everything we have. I want that ship wiped from existence." His officers hesitated, but they obeyed. The Dominion's largest and most powerful warships adjusted their weapons, focusing their full firepower on the Blackstar. A final, desperate attempt to destroy the unknown threat. The Blackstar did not move. It did not try to dodge. It simply waited. And then, just as the Dominion's dreadnoughts unleashed their full fury, the Blackstar flickered, and the attacks passed through it, as if it were never there. The energy blasts continued on, striking Dominion ships caught in their path. Friendly fire erupted across the battlefield, warships tearing each other apart in their confusion. Panic spread. The Supreme Commander felt his stomach twist as the realization sank in. They could not win. Not against this. Not against something that defied everything they knew. And then, for the first time since the battle began, the Blackstar spoke again. "You were warned." With those words, the Blackstar unleashed something different, a pulse larger than before, spreading outward in all directions. Dominion warships, the mightiest fleet in the known galaxy, shut down. Engines failed. Weapons flickered and died. Systems collapsed. The Supreme Commander's own ship was not spared. Alarms blared. Consoles darkened. And suddenly, his dreadnought was adrift. Every Dominion warship was left powerless. The Blackstar had disabled an entire armada in one move. The Coalition ships, untouched by the pulse, remained fully operational. The battle was over. Supreme Commander Vargas Kotor sat in stunned silence, watching as his once invincible fleet floated helplessly in space. The Blackstar, silent and unmoving, loomed over them like a specter. The war had changed in an instant. Victory had been certain, until the USS Blackstar arrived and turned the tide. The silence before a battle was always the most unsettling part. The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly, dotted with the distant glow of stars. Yet in this moment, it felt suffocating. Admiral Jorvan stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship, staring at the massive fleet of the Vorthan Dominion ahead. The Dominion had come in force, hundreds of warships, each bristling with weapons capable of reducing entire planets to ash. The Coalition had known this day would come, but they had never expected it to happen so soon. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and every battle simulation pointed to only one outcome: total annihilation. His officers tried to remain calm, but the tension in the air was thick. Some whispered prayers to gods that had long stopped listening, while others simply clenched their fists, waiting for the inevitable. The Dominion did not negotiate. They did not accept surrender. They only conquered. And now, they were about to wipe out the last remnants of resistance in this sector. But then, something changed. A single blip appeared on the sensors. The lone vessel emerging from the darkness of space, moving at a speed no known ship could achieve. At first, Jorvan thought it was a sensor malfunction, a glitch. But as the image sharpened, he saw it clearly. A black, featureless warship, its hull smooth as glass, moving without any visible propulsion. It was unlike anything in the Coalition fleet, and it was heading straight for the Dominion armada. The bridge fell silent as the strange vessel approached. It was suicide. One ship against an entire fleet. Even the Dominion officers must have thought it was a joke. Supreme Commander Vargas Kotor, watching from his dreadnought, sneered, "Fools. They send a single vessel to face us. This is an insult." He turned to his weapons officer. "Destroy it." The order was given. Hundreds of Dominion warships locked onto the mysterious black vessel, and in the next instant, space itself seemed to erupt. Plasma torpedoes, laser cannons, and railgun slugs tore through the void, a concentrated barrage capable of reducing a moon to rubble. There was no way anything could survive. And yet, as the firestorm cleared, the black ship remained, untouched, unscathed. It had not even attempted to evade the attack. It had simply absorbed it, as if the very laws of physics did not apply to it. Gasps echoed across the Coalition bridge. Admiral Jorvan felt his heart pound. What in the name of? Before he could finish, the unknown ship responded. No visible weapons, no missile ports, no energy buildup, just a sudden, eerie pulse that spread outward. The moment it touched the Dominion fleet, chaos erupted. The first Dominion warship simply disappeared. No explosion, no wreckage, just gone. The second was torn apart by some invisible force, its hull breaking apart like brittle glass. A third ship lost control of its systems, its own weapons turning against its fleet, firing wildly as if controlled by a ghost. Panic spread like wildfire. Supreme Commander Vargas Kotor shot up from his command chair, his scales darkening with rage and fear. What is happening? His officers scrambled for answers, but there were none. Every time the black warship moved, another Dominion vessel fell. It didn't fire missiles. It didn't unleash barrages of energy. It simply moved, and destruction followed. Identify that ship. Vargas roared, slamming his fist against the control panel. But the sensors gave him nothing. No data, no classification, no transmissions, just a void of information, as if the ship was beyond their understanding. Then, for the first time, a transmission cut through the silence. A voice, cold and mechanical, echoed across every Dominion and coalition ship alike. This is the U.S. Blackstar. Cease hostilities or be eradicated. The Supreme Commander bared his fangs. You dare threaten the Dominion. He turned to his fleet. Destroy it. All ships, fire at full power. Wipe it from existence. The Dominion obeyed. Their largest dreadnoughts unleashed weapons that could crack open planets. Beams of pure energy lanced through space, targeting the U.S. Blackstar with everything the Dominion had. The coalition watched in horror, expecting the unknown ship to be vaporized. But instead, the Blackstar shimmered. And then, in an instant, it was gone, vanished from sight. Before anyone could react, it reappeared behind the Dominion formation. Another pulse. Another warship erased from reality. The Supreme Commander felt his blood turn cold. Impossible, he whispered. His officers looked at him in desperation, their confidence shattered. The Dominion did not retreat, but now they were hesitating. The U.S. Blackstar moved again, too fast for any ship to track, as if it existed outside of normal space. Another Dominion battleship was torn apart. Then another, and another. Within minutes, a quarter of the Dominion fleet was gone. The coalition had barely fired a shot. Admiral Jorvan watched, struggling to process what he was witnessing. This was beyond anything he had ever seen. But one thing was clear. Whoever controlled the Blackstar was not here to negotiate. They were here to end the war. The Supreme Commander clenched his fists, his reptilian eyes burning with fury. If we are to die, we will take it with us. He gave the final order. Every surviving Dominion warship would overload its core, turning their own fleet into a massive detonation that would take the Blackstar with them. The countdown began. The fleet prepared for self-destruction. The Supreme Commander smirked. You may have power, but you will not have victory. But as the Dominion ships powered up their final attack, the Blackstar reacted. Another pulse, this one more intense, more final. And in the next moment, every Dominion ship went dark. Their engines shut down. Their weapons died. Their systems collapsed. The mighty Dominion fleet was reduced to nothing more than drifting husks in the void. The Supreme Commander fell to his knees, his voice barely a whisper. No, this is not possible. The U.S. Blackstar hovered for a moment, as if observing its handiwork. Then, without another word, it vanished into the darkness, leaving nothing but silence behind. The battle was over. The war, perhaps, was over. The Dominion's greatest fleet had been destroyed by a single ship. The coalition officers stood in stunned silence, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Admiral Jorvan exhaled slowly. What in the stars have we just witnessed? No one had an answer. All they knew was that the U.S. Blackstar had arrived, and it had delivered the first strike. The battlefield of space was silent in the aftermath of destruction. Wreckage from the Dominion fleet drifted in the void, the once mighty warships now nothing more than lifeless debris. The coalition forces, who had braced themselves for total annihilation, stood frozen in disbelief. Moments ago, they had been outmatched, their defeat all but certain. Yet now, the Dominion's overwhelming force had been shattered, and all because of one ship, the U.S. Blackstar. Its appearance had turned the impossible into reality. No one knew what it was, where it had come from, or who controlled it. But its power was undeniable. It had moved through the enemy fleet like a phantom, dismantling warships with no visible weapons, no known technology. And just as quickly as it had arrived, it had disappeared, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions. Admiral Jorvan stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship, his fingers gripping the edges of his console. His officers were just as stunned. Did we win? One of them whispered, as if speaking too loudly would break the fragile moment. The answer should have been obvious. There was no enemy left to fight. But the reality was far more complicated. The Dominion was not a single fleet, not a single battle. It was an empire that stretched across the galaxy, and they would not take this defeat lightly. The supreme commander of the Dominion, Varkis Kotor, had been humiliated in front of his entire armada. And if there was one thing the Dominion never forgave, it was weakness. Somewhere, in the wreckage of the battle, a few Dominion ships still remained, crippled, powerless, but alive. Jorvan knew that this defeat would be reported back to the Dominion's core worlds, and when it was, the response would be swift and merciless. The Coalition fleet had survived, but survival was not victory. The war was not over. If anything, it had just escalated. The Dominion would return, and next time, they would not underestimate what had happened here. The only question that mattered now was, where had the USS Blackstar gone, and would it return when the Dominion inevitably struck back? Before he could dwell on it further, a new transmission flickered to life on the bridge. It was heavily encrypted, the kind of message that no normal Coalition channel could send. The screen filled with static. Then a single chilling line appeared. The tide has turned. Prepare. That was all. No signature, no source. But Jorvan knew exactly what it meant. On the Dominion's capital world, Supreme Commander Varkis Kotor stood before the High Council, his scales dull with shame. He had never known fear before, but now it gripped his chest like an iron vice. The High Lords of the Dominion did not tolerate failure, and he had suffered the worst defeat in their history. The destruction of his fleet, the total loss of control over the battlefield, it was unacceptable. And yet, when he had tried to explain what had happened, he had no words. How did one describe an enemy that did not obey the laws of war? How did one explain a ship that destroyed entire warships without firing a shot? The council chamber was silent, the High Lords studying him with cold, reptilian eyes. Finally, the Grand Chancellor spoke. "What is your explanation, Supreme Commander?" His voice was slow, deliberate, and far more dangerous than any weapon. Varkis swallowed hard. We were caught off guard. The enemy deployed an unknown vessel with capabilities beyond our understanding. It was not a Coalition ship. And you allowed this thing to decimate our forces. The Chancellor's voice remained calm, but the weight of his words was suffocating. You fled. The Supreme Commander's jaw tightened. No, we fought with honor. And yet you lost. The Chancellor's gaze narrowed. The Dominion does not lose, Varkis. We crush. We conquer. We are inevitable. And yet, today, we have been humbled. He leaned forward, his claws tapping against the stone table. This is unacceptable. You will rectify this failure. Find this ship. Study it. Destroy it. The next time you face the USS Blackstar, it will not escape. Varkis bowed his head. He had no choice. If he failed again, he would not live to see another battle. Back on the Coalition homeworld, Admiral Jorvan stood in a war council, surrounded by the leaders of the Coalition's remaining forces. The victory should have been a cause for celebration, but instead, it was a cause for concern. We need to prepare for retaliation, he said, his voice firm. The Dominion will not accept this defeat. They will return in greater numbers. The council members murmured in agreement. Then we must strike first, one of the generals argued, while they are still recovering. Strike with what? Another commander countered, "We barely survived that battle. If the Blackstar had not intervened, we would all be dead. Our fleet is in no shape to launch an offensive." Silence settled over the room. They all knew the truth. The coalition had been given a second chance, but they were still not strong enough to win this war. Not alone. "We need to find the Blackstar," Jorvin said at last. "If it fights for us, we may have a chance." "And if it does not?" someone asked. Jorvin had no answer. The U.S. Blackstar was a mystery. No one knew where it had come from, why it had intervened, or what its true purpose was. But one thing was clear. Without it, the coalition's days were numbered. The turning tide of war had begun, but whether it would lead to victory or disaster was still uncertain. As Jorvin left the war room, he looked up at the night sky, wondering if somewhere, out in the endless void, the Blackstar was watching. And if it was, he could only hope that when the time came, it would fight by their side once more. Because if the Dominion returned in full force, the coalition would not survive without it. No one knew where it had come from. No one knew who commanded it. No one even knew if it was truly a warship or something far beyond their understanding. But every soldier, every admiral, and every leader in the galaxy had heard its name, U.S. Blackstar. It was not just a ship anymore. It was a legend, a ghost that haunted the Dominion's war machine and gave the coalition a sliver of hope in an otherwise hopeless war. Some whispered that it was a lost creation of an ancient civilization, a relic of a forgotten war. Others claimed it was not a machine at all, but something alive, something watching from the darkness between the stars, deciding who would live and who would be erased. What was undeniable, however, was that it had changed the course of history. The first time it appeared, the Dominion had been on the verge of complete victory. Their fleet was unmatched, their forces unstoppable. The coalition had been prepared for annihilation. Then, from the shadows of space, the U.S. Blackstar had emerged, and within moments, everything had changed. It had destroyed warships with no visible weapons. It had moved through enemy formations like a phantom, faster than anything should have been able to move. The Dominion's greatest warriors had been reduced to terrified survivors, watching as their fleet was torn apart by an enemy they could not understand. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it had vanished. For weeks after the battle, the galaxy remained silent, waiting for the next move. The coalition, though victorious, did not celebrate. They knew this war was not over. For a counterattack unlike anything seen before, Supreme Commander Varkas Kotor, once the most feared strategist in the Dominion's history, now sat in darkened war rooms, poring over every report, every transmission, trying to understand what had happened. He had fought hundreds of battles, conquered dozens of civilizations, but never had he faced an enemy like this. "What is it?" he had growled at his intelligence officers. "How does it fight? How do we stop it?" But no one had an answer. The U.S. Blackstar had left no wreckage to study, no transmissions to trace, nothing that could be analyzed. It had appeared from nowhere, destroyed an entire fleet, and disappeared again without a trace. It was as if it did not exist within the normal laws of space, and that terrified the Dominion. In the coalition ranks, the Blackstar was seen as both a savior and a mystery. Some believed it was an experimental human warship, a classified project hidden away for the final moments of desperation. Others thought it was something else entirely, something far older, something that had simply chosen to intervene at that moment. Admiral Jorvin, one of the few survivors of the battle where the Blackstar had first appeared, found himself in endless meetings, answering the same question again and again. "Where is it?" the coalition leaders asked. "How do we contact it?" But Jorvin had no answers. He had stood on the bridge of his warship and watched as the Blackstar tore through the Dominion fleet like a vengeful spirit. He had seen its dark, smooth hull move in ways no ordinary vessel could. He had felt the presence of something beyond human comprehension, something far more powerful than anything in the known galaxy. And yet, when the battle was over, it had left without a word, as if it had never been there. He had tried to send transmissions, tried to reach out, but there was no response. It had come and gone on its own terms. That was the most terrifying part. It had chosen to intervene, but what if, next time, it chose to remain silent? In the dark corners of the galaxy, rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed that a Dominion fleet had encountered the Blackstar again, only to vanish without a trace. Others whispered of hidden research stations where scientists worked day and night, trying to unlock the secret of the Blackstar's technology. But no matter how many theories arose, no one knew the truth. No one knew why it had come or when it would return. And so, the legend of the U.S. Blackstar grew. Soldiers in the coalition whispered its name before battles, hoping it would appear to turn the tide once again. Dominion warriors feared its return, dreading the moment when the Black Phantom would emerge from the void to claim them. It became more than just a ship. It became a force, a symbol of something greater. But whether it was a weapon of salvation or an omen of destruction, no one could say. All they knew was that somewhere, hidden in the vast emptiness of space, the U.S. Blackstar was watching. And when the time came, it would choose its next move. Until then, the galaxy could only wait in fear and hope, wondering when the legend would become reality once more.